Just taking more pictures.
Rules Committee will come to order, and thank you very much for joining us today. The Rules Committee is meeting today to consider two important items, the conference report to accompany H.R. 644, the Trade Facilitation and Trade Enforcement Act, and H.J. Res. 75, the continuing resolution for fiscal year 2016 appropriations. The conference report reflects months of hard work and tireless commitment, not only on both sides of the aisle, but also by members and our staffs on both sides who have worked very diligently, many times long nights and weekends, and I know Saturday mornings, because I've been a part of those, to accomplish and get us to where we are. The results, while not totally known, but they're in on what's going to be presented today, that it's a bipartisan measure that will help increase trade, increase U.S. competitiveness, and increase American jobs, good jobs. And while being fully offset, it also includes language that ensures that trade agreements do not require changes to U.S. immigration laws. That was one of the provisions which I have stuck to, and I'm delighted to see that is in here. I'm glad to see there was bipartisan agreement. Or to obligate the United States to grant access to an expanded access to visas. I think these were important parts, something that I think many members look forward to. H.J. Res. 75 is a short-term funding measure that will allow negotiations related to a full-year funding bill to continue. Simply a date change. That's all we're doing. It's a short-term patch, and while they're not always ideal, they're necessary. It's necessary to, as we finalize the deal, and I know that there are people sitting right before us who will be a part of making sure that they know that we want to fund our government in a thoughtful, careful, direct way that's open, that the American public has confidence of what this body is doing. We're capable of every single bit of it. We're capable of that, and we try and prove that up in the Rules Committee. We've done this in the past. We can do this again. We can do this in a forthright way where we can perhaps agree, perhaps disagree, but get our work done. So with us today is the brand new chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, the gentleman from Spring, Texas, Kevin Brady, Woodlands, Texas. Spring is next door. And ranking member, Sandy Levin. Mr. Levin, I'm delighted that you're here. We also have the Honorable Dave Reichert, the gentleman from Washington, the gentleman we call our sheriff. I'm glad that you're here today, Dave, and you can add insight into this because you're the expertise that is necessary for Chairman Brady to be successful today. That comes, otherwise he would be in trouble. That comes as a result of a desire that I have, and I've expressed it to the young chairman, that I want to get this hearing right. I want to be able to address the questions properly. I want the answers to be as you give them to us that are forthright and succinct. But the members of this committee want and need to ask questions that are necessary, and we've got a chance to do it. So, gentlemen, welcome to the Rules Committee. With that said, anything you have in writing will be in the record. The gentlewoman, the stenographer, speaks Texan, but will understand Michigan and Washingtonese also, but your written word's better. And I'd like to defer, if I can, to the gentleman, the ranking member, the gentleman from Florida.
Thank
Judge
you,
Hastings, you're recognized.
I have no opening statement, and I look forward to testimony of the witness.
Thank you very much. Chairman Brady, I'm delighted that you're here. The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief. And members of the Rules Committee, I have with me Mr. Dave Reichert, who chairs the Trade Subcommittee for us. And I'm really pleased that we have filed the conference report on the Trade Facilitation and Trade Enforcement Act of 2015 and look forward to it being on the House floor as soon as tomorrow. I'm also excited that this conference process marks a return to regular order that I'm committed to as the Ways and Means Committee. The House and the Senate each produced strong bills based on robust member input. We met on a bipartisan basis, we worked out our differences, and we solved real problems. That's how the process is supposed to work, and I hope the American people can expect to see more of this in the future. And this report builds on the good work of my fellow conferees and our current and former Trade Subcommittee Chairman, Representatives Reichert and Teaberry. And before I talk about the specifics of the proposal, I want to point out that this legislation is an important piece of our pro-growth agenda for America. It will make it easier for workers to compete and to win. It's good for American workers and good for American jobs. There's a lot in this bill that members can be proud about. It accomplishes several valuable goals on trade facilitation and enforcement. It facilitates and it streamlines the flow of legitimate trade while enabling customs and border protection to better enforce our customs laws. It also automates and modernizes Customs and Border Protection's information system. That means it moves these goods faster across our border and more securely. It also directs the agency to effectively set against evasion of anti-dumping and countervailing duties through dedicating specific resources and personnel to fight evasion. And it gives them new authorities, including a new investigations process. Representative Bustani and Representative Jason Smith deserve credit for working together and with their colleagues to combine the Protect and Enforce Acts, and it will improve enforcement of U.S. trade laws and combat currency manipulation. The bill also strengthens Trade Promotion Authority, which we enacted earlier this year, reaffirms that trade agreements should not include provisions on immigrations, and Chairman Sessions, thank you for your focus in that area, or greenhouse gas emissions. And the trade promotion procedures should not be used with respect to these areas, and in fact, they are blocked. Chairman Sessions, I credit you in particular on the immigration provisions. The conference report combats politically motivated acts of boycott against, divestment from, and sanctions against our friend and ally Israel. This bill helps fight human trafficking, an issue that's important to so many of us. And with respect to the miscellaneous tariff bill, it includes a strong sense of Congress reaffirming our commitment to advancing an MTB legislative process with consultation and consistent with House rules. And it contains the Internet Tax Freedom Act to make permanent the ban on states and local taxing authorities taxing the Internet access or Internet commerce while allowing grandfathered states until 2020 to phase out existing taxes. Finally, the bill is fully offset. The fact is, there's a lot of things for members to like in this bill, and more importantly, a lot for the American people to like as well. And it's only the beginning. We're going to keep moving pro-growth bills like this through our committee and through the House. And with that brief overview, I'm pleased to answer any of your questions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Very succinct and to the point. We're delighted that you're here, and thank you very much. Mr. Levin, your performances before this committee have been exemplary. You choose to come yourself and put yourself at the behest of this committee. You're doing that again. We appreciate and respect you, and the gentleman is now recognized.
Thank you for your kind words. I was going to say my pleasure. It really is. Congratulations, Kevin. We've been here together before, but not with Kevin as chair. And he knows he's had our warmest congratulations. I'll try to sum this up briefly. Most of the pages in this bill relate to customs, and there was bipartisan agreement on every provision therein, except there was one disagreement over the enforced provision. I look at Angela. We worked hard to try to resolve that over a long period of time. But other than that, it became a bipartisan bill. The problem is that it no longer became such when the House put together in Ways and Means Committee and then on the floor what's called a customs bill, but in terms of major controversial provisions, they have nothing to do with customs. The Senate bill was without most of these provisions, and if that bill were now before us, I think we would be on the Democratic side voting for it. The problem is a number of the provisions that are in this conference report, and let me just mention them briefly. As Mr. Brady said, there is a provision essentially restricting our negotiations regarding climate change. And here Paris is meeting 140 nations, 50 nations throughout the world trying to face up to this issue of climate change. And we have in a customs bill a limitation on the ability of our negotiators. And there's one example, among others, For example, in TTIP, which is covered by TPA, there was a decision by our negotiators, the Europeans and the US, to address emission standards. That could not be done by USTR under the language of this bill. And so the climate change provision was placed in there, I think, because they thought it might win some votes, but it's bad policy. The same is true of the provisions on human trafficking. There's been some added language put in, but the strength of the provision in the original Senate bill has been very much weakened. And indeed, what could result for countries under Tier 3, these are the worst countries in terms of human trafficking. Essentially, they could proceed under our trade negotiations unless, even if all they did was to take some steps, but nowhere come close to meeting the basic standards as to human trafficking. This is sex trafficking, and it's also trafficking in workers. In Malaysia, there are 4 million foreign nationals working. Half of them are undocumented, and the other half are documented more or less. And what's been happening is that the government or contractors, in many cases, where people are documented, take away their passports so they can't leave. And they're making terrible wages. So in the House bill, it was a mistake to add this provision that had nothing to do with customs. And now this conference report fails to have a provision with real teeth in it. And the same is true in terms of currency. There was one provision that was not related to customs that we wanted to stay in there, and that related to a bill on anti-dumping countervailing duties that was put forth by Mr. Schumer. And we overwhelmingly passed a similar bill in the House in terms of currency manipulation. Essentially, what this bill does on currency manipulation is to say nothing of any meaning. It simply restates the powers the president already has, the authority he has, and essentially says at the end, the government of the U.S. can do whatever it wants in terms of currency manipulation. We lost, talking about job growth, we lost because of Japan's currency manipulation in the 90s and China's in the 2000 plus period. The estimate is between 3 and 4 million jobs because of the currency manipulation of those two countries. And all we did was essentially talk. And this provision essentially confirms the ability, no matter who's in the administration when it comes to this provision, to talk. Let me just say on the miscellaneous tariff bill, I appreciate there's a sense of Congress. We've been trying to move ahead on the miscellaneous tariff bill for years. The problem has been a provision in the rules that the Republicans that you put in some years ago, essentially calling miscellaneous tariff provisions earmarks. And here there's been strong bipartisan support, and we've worked endlessly to work it out, and we can't get a bill. In talking about jobs, this relates to imports where there is no competition from an American source. And there has to be a verification that using these parts as a component in a product will not dislocate Americans. And we just have been stuck for years over this. So I think when it comes to job growth, we need more than a sense of Congress. I want to close by just talking about an unfortunate provision that was added, I think, at the last minute, and it's very controversial over in the Senate. It's not within our jurisdiction, but it's a permanent ban on internet taxes. And it relates to some equipment relating to the internet, but not to others. And as I understand it, they took the grandfather clause out of it that relates to, I think, 9 states or maybe 7 states. So that ban would apply immediately. And we shouldn't be doing that, talking about regular order. We should not be doing that. And I think I have somewhere a list of the states that would be affected. Also, there's a feeling, and it's strongly in the Senate and I think here, as we talk about the permanent ban on internet taxes, we should also be talking about the present tax provisions relating to retail sales. Because brick and mortar entities are very much affected increasingly through internet sales. In fact, the information that's come out from the last Thanksgiving period showed the major change in the balance of retail sales. So why in the world is it in here? I think it's because 1 or 2 or maybe a few more people on the Senate side decided to insert it in a customs bill. So I very much object to that. I also object to what has been done with the provisions I mentioned, and I'm afraid because of the action here, what was a bipartisan customs bill has become very much a deep division within the ranks within the House. I'd be glad to answer any questions, and I welcome the opportunity once again to be here.
Mr. Levin, thank you very much. Chairman Reichert, you've been brought to the table because you not only offer expertise and working relationship to this, but I believe you've got a lot to add. We're delighted that you're here, and the gentleman's
We look forward, I don't think.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I just want to mention that it's been a privilege to work with Mr. Levin and our new chairman, Mr. Brady, and I've been the chair of the Trade Subcommittee for about 2 weeks, and have enjoyed every minute of it thus far, and I'm proud to be here and appreciate the invitation by the chairman to be a part of the process this afternoon. So this is, I think, important. Bipartisan legislation has been mentioned. With the significant role that trade plays in Washington State, 40% of our jobs in Washington State are directly related to trade, most trade-dependent state in the country. We must ensure that we are doing all that we can do to facilitate legitimate trade, fair trade, free trade, and with my background, I appreciate in this bill how much we must also focus on protecting against unlawful trade. This legislation does exactly that. It ensures our laws are enforced, protecting consumers and businesses alike, and updates our export-import processes for the benefit of businesses of all sizes, large and small. I'd just like to highlight some of the key elements of this bill briefly. It'll be a little bit repetitive of some of the chairman's comments, but I think it's important to highlight these issues. This bill does facilitate trade. It reduces paperwork burdens. And as the chairman has said, time costs money. And this is an effort to reduce the amount of time that we take in completing that paperwork and creating those burdens. It modernizes our export-import process. It enhances trade enforcement, which I have a lot of background in the enforcement world, as you know. Establishes tools for Customs and Border Protection to combat invasion and expands protections evasion and expands protections for our innovators. It strengthens our previous work on TPA through greater oversight and enhanced objectives, and increases our ties with our critical partner, Israel, promotes small business trade, and reaffirms our commitment to a path forward for MTBs. And I know the difficulties there. We all recognize that, but we are consistent with House rules and as we move forward on this issue. And lastly, I want to mention the human trafficking issue, mainly because I know there's some objection to some of the language in this bill. However, I have most of my law enforcement experience has been working on a case over a 19-year period involving a person who murdered over 60 people, all involved in the human trafficking world. We have a huge human trafficking problem right here in the United States. And of course, we all recognize this problem exists around the globe. We have a responsibility to take action. Is this language perfect? Is this bill perfect? No legislation, as everyone in this room recognizes, is not perfect, but it's a step forward. I think that a relationship with countries, especially in the trade world, provides us that opportunity to build those partnerships, to have impact and effect on problems such as human trafficking and child labor. So I know that there can be more that could be done, but this is an important first step in this world, and I'm excited to be a part of this, and I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, could I just add, because
Yes,
I've been
Chairman.
told, we've just seen the bill on internet taxes, and we'll double check. It may be that the grandfather clause is in there. The rest of what I said is, I think, is accurate, but it's not in our jurisdiction, but we need to take a look at it because it's been tagged on to a customs bill within our jurisdiction. We've been in touch with the Judiciary Committee, and we'll get all the facts out. Thank you for letting me be clear on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brady, I'd like to ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
It's got your name on it, so I'm going to assume you can answer questions. It's Trade Facilitation, Trade Enforcement Act of 2015, appears to be page 77. Does this gentleman need a copy?
No, just,
It instructs the United States Executive Director of the International Monetary Fund to call for additional rigorous surveillance of macroeconomic and exchange rate policies. My question to you is this expected to be what might be a leading edge opportunity for us to avoid what we've seen with market currency manipulation by some partners, that this actually ahead of time says the United States is going to take the lead on identifying and understanding these issues before they become a problem, so that we can avoid some of the other relationships that have been most difficult, not only on us on an economic basis, but also on a political basis, Republicans and Democrats. Is that the purpose of this, or am I reading too
no, it
much
is.
into
It's,
it?
Mr. Chairman, it's part of the currency manipulation portion of this bill. Look, currency manipulation is real. Both parties are absolutely committed to fighting against it. It's how we do it that's the challenge. As the White House has pointed out itself, currency is complex, affected by a lot of things, including your savings rate, your investment as a country, the economy, what your central bank does. And so the approach, the bipartisan approach that came through here, was to take that view where we recruit other countries to be part of this, where we create new tools for the Treasury to tackle early on, including new analysis and new assessment early on in this process, that those red flags give us a chance to engage sooner in the process. It creates a new bipartisan commission, the House, Senate, and the White House, to advise Treasury on currency issues, so it strengthens our role as a legislative branch in this effort. And so the alternative idea was, in my view, would have boomeranged back on the United States, caused other countries, including China, to raise their border border taxes and barriers against us. It would have, I think, invited retaliation against the United States, which means the loss of jobs here in the United States. Frankly, I think other countries, under the alternative idea, would have had a case to make against us in our central bank. Wrongly, I might add, but still a case, because since 2001, just take the long view, the dollar is down against the euro. It's down against the Chinese currency in the long view. And so other countries could make a case, tie us up while real currency manipulation is occurring. And so the bipartisan agreement we reached in this bill, no question, strengthens our hands on a very complex issue, gives the White House and Treasury new tools, and gives us, frankly, an earlier and stronger voice.
Well, I just want you to know that in reading this and looking at it, it kind of reminded me when I handled the free trade agreement between the United States of America with Rob Portman on the House side with Singapore. There was an insistence that we followed through at that time that any discrepancies between the two countries would be resolved in a federal district court in the United States of America because they understood our court system was honest and fair. I think you getting out, Mr. Levins, be congratulated, Mr. Reichert to be congratulated. I see you've got at least one of your staffers that I've spent a lot of working time with, Angela, who understands these issues also. I think you've done a smart thing. I would like to know that as you have these hearings where Congress is updated and gets involved in these, this committee would be interested in hearing back from you.
Yes, sir.
As you come to give us these ideas, because it pits us many times against each other on this issue that I believe we could work closer together and be together as opposed to far apart by staying up with you. And I want to congratulate you and Mr. Levin, Mr. Reichert, for a job well done on that piece that I personally was interested in. Thank you very much. Mrs. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome our friends here, congratulate Mr. Brady officially
Thank you.
on his assuming the chairmanship, and my classmate, Mr. Reichert, for the great opportunity he's been given also. I appreciate all the hard work that you all have done on this. I think, as the speaker said this morning, we're very fortunate to have another conference report coming to us this year. Indicates a lot of great work that's been going on in the committees. And I thank you, and I have no questions. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Levin, for being here also.
Sandy, that's pretty good. Sometimes she's,
You said that, I didn't.
I've been here a few years and I've seen her be pretty tough on people, so Virginia must be getting close to holidays.
Yeah.
Mrs. Slaughter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Levin, you pretty much convinced me. I know we've been working closely together on the TPP. The human rights violation, Malaysia seems to be the world's champ in human rights violations, and I know that the State Department sort of upgraded them to make them eligible there. That's pretty strange. But would you just take just a minute to tell me what happened with the currency manipulation at the conference? It was in the Senate bill but got removed from that? Is that
No,
correct?
what happened, it was in the Senate bill.
It's a very important piece of work.
Absolutely. And I just want to say to the chairman and to the chairman of the committee, we've done lots of talking. And the IMF has clear rules as to what is currency manipulation and what is not. It's very clear. And there is no way the steps that we took, some of them disagreed with it, involve currency manipulation. And no one is saying that Japan now is manipulating the currency. China is doing so, but less. But the time for talk is long over, and that's what we did when we voted on the counterpart of the Senate bill. Talk about bipartisanship. The currency CVD bill passed 348 to 79 in this House with broad bipartisan support. So I'll just finish with that. There's no way of calling this provision that essentially reiterates the status quo bipartisan when this bill rejects the concrete action that was taken on currency reform in the House some years ago. By the way, let me just say, in terms of the bill that's been added on internet taxes, and we'll get the information to you, it's my understanding the grandfathering ends 2020. We need to take a look at it. I don't know why in the world it's here. It shouldn't be.
It's caused a lot of grief, I know.
Talk about regular order. The Senate should not dictate to the House. And we're essentially accepting that dictate about an issue that was never discussed in our, maybe it was discussed in judiciary. Surely wasn't discussed by us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no further questions.
Gentleman yields back her time. Thank you very much. The gentleman, Chairman Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to, again, congratulate Fred and tell him how pleased we are. I thought about asking Mr. Reichert, is he looking over your shoulder like our speaker is looking over his shoulder? But I know both of you well enough to know that's not happening, and just how pleased we are that both of you are in these new positions. We're always pleased to see our friend, the gentleman from Michigan, but and appreciate you bringing before us such an important piece of legislation. I have no questions about it. Look forward to supporting it on the floor.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Polis.
Thank you, and I guess for Mr. Brady, I was very surprised to see, and hadn't really heard it was in the mix, the addition of the Internet Tax Freedom Act, which I'm a co-sponsor of a standalone legislation, but seems to me entirely unrelated to bilateral and multilateral trade negotiations. I think that that's a dangerous precedence as we look at an open and participatory process to have what I feel to be a very unrelated bill in there. And I just wanted to ask you how that came to be that this other widely supported bill that I certainly support but has nothing to do with trade got put in here.
Sure, as you know, the temporary moratorium expires. Both in this Congress and last Congress, we passed, in fact, by voice vote, so there's strong bipartisan agreement on this. When it expires, Americans face tax increases. Access to the internet matters, not just for business, but for young children. I've got them myself. And so the costs of allowing states to increase taxes dramatically, I think, would be damaging to those who, in fact, need that access. And so while that is not in our committee's jurisdiction, certainly the clock is ticking on the end of that moratorium.
And reclaiming my time, I agree with everything you said on the policy, but again, it seems like it's more of, if anything, an extender issue or judicial, it's a judiciary committee issue. I don't see how it's related to the trade priorities and customs. So that's, I mean, why wasn't this, for instance, put in, if it was going to be put in with something, why not with extenders, which one could argue it resembles more closely?
You know, that's a decision for our leadership to make. Certainly, they assume this is a bill that has strong bipartisan support, the customs bill, as does the internet more permanent moratorium. And so, as to the reasons, it seems to me with the clock ticking, they wanted us to finish our work before we leave.
And does Mr. Levin, do you have any insights into why the Internet Tax Freedom Act is made permanent in what's seemingly an unrelated bill?
No, I went to the opening of the conference committee and everybody spoke. And if I'm correct, there was not a whimper about this.
Okay, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized, Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
One chairman from Texas apparently was not enough today, so happy to have two chairmen from Texas.
You know what? You got a good one here, finally.
Mr. Reichert, I appreciate what you had to say about human trafficking. I know Mr. Levin spoke from the heart when he expressed his regret that these provisions did not look differently, but knowing your vast experience of fighting on behalf of folks who have nobody else to to fight for them, trying to put the bad actors where bad actors belong. To hear your encouragement about these provisions as a good first step, I would just ask you, you've worked on these issues for a long time. In your view, this is exactly that, a first step, and more steps are to come.
It's absolutely a first step, and I think that, as we look at human trafficking here in the United States, where, of course, my experience comes from in Seattle, Washington area, we looked at, we've evolved at how we handle human trafficking here in the United States. We didn't have friends that came to us and said, hey, you might want to try this or this to try and have an impact on ending human trafficking here in the United States. So back in the 70s and 80s era, victims, young girls who were out there in the human trafficking world, were not looked at as victims, but they were looked at as criminals. And these were kids who ran away from home, were victimized at home, physically, emotionally abused, end up on the street, victimized again by people on the street, Johns and pimps, and then victimized a third time by the system. So we have a lot of guilt to shoulder, and that we are burdened with here in the United States. What I've seen on the local level that really helps is the communities come together. So when you look at your local community and how they might end human trafficking and the crimes that are attached to that and come with it, it's really the community effort, the partnership, and the total effort together with all of the agencies involved. You can apply that on an international standard. So countries in the community, this global community that we live in, coming together and beginning to help these countries with this major problem address these issues, instead of saying, we don't want anything to do with you until you get your act cleaned up, that's absolutely the wrong way to go. So one step, let's get engaged, let's start to help them develop a plan to end human trafficking, and we can move this thing forward. So is it perfect? No, but it absolutely is a first step, and I think a critical first step.
Mr. Levin, I always block out a very short period of time on my calendar for a Rules Committee meeting on a conference report, because I just expect it to motor right along. I did notice that you did not sign the conference report, so I take your words of suggestion about how it should be improved to heart. You found it to be something that you couldn't put your signature on. But to the chairman, I would say these bills don't end up here unless you were able to build the bipartisan and bicameral consensus. I saw that Senator Wyden did sign the conference report. Senator Stabenow did sign the conference report. It is my most favorite time because it means something's headed to the president's desk. It's my least favorite time because I have the least amount of ability to influence that process. If I'm not sitting on that conference committee, I am comforted by your leadership on that conference committee. Congratulations on being here today. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman does yield back time. The gentleman from Louisville, Texas does not seek time. The gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Stivers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate the three of you being here. I appreciate your leadership. Congratulations to the two new chairmen, and we have great faith that you're going to do an incredible job not only in finishing up stuff this year, but leading the tax reform efforts next year, which are so important, and thank you for your leadership on this. I do have a question for, I guess, anybody that wants to take it. So the gentleman from Michigan laid out pretty well that the miscellaneous tariff portion is problematic because of our poorly worded earmark ban language. Is there something we should consider in our House rules amending our earmark language to make it clear that this miscellaneous tariffs bill that is important, or provisions that are important, can get done and are not just a giveaway or earmark?
Maybe I should be the last to answer that. It was a mistake, and I'm not sure it was thought through. We've been working, I don't want to go on too long, because all of us care deeply about the miscellaneous tariff bill. And we put,
Could the gentleman please speak into his
I'm sorry,
microphone?
we put I was chatting with Mr. Stivers, I'm sorry. Is that okay?
That's better.
Great.
Be okay if look, we put the most full transparency provisions ever provided for any legislative action. People can go and look, and if any of the four of us object, because it will compete with an American product, it's immediately eliminated. So there has to be 100% bipartisan.
Unanimity.
100%. And I think Treasury, this may not be 100% certain, also has a kind of a veto. So I just urge you, you've been stuck on language, and it's really inhibited production in the United States.
Well, I'm hopeful that maybe we can do something to tweak our earmark. I'm not suggesting we abandon the entire earmark ban, but just tweak the language to make it clear that this is not an earmark. Mr. Chairman, do you have any thoughts?
No, look, I agree in this case. These tariffs are not earmarks. They are introduced, and they don't go through that process. It is so open. A member of Congress has to introduce legislation. It's publicly vetted. It's vetted by the committees. It's vetted by the Commerce Department. They have to be small, and if any member frankly objects, they're left out. These are, in effect, small tax cuts that allow our businesses, when there isn't a U.S. producer, to bring it in, either for consumers here or to build their product and compete around the world. And as opposed to an earmark, they are applicable to any company, whether it is 1 or 100, bringing that product or that chemical or that coating in to do this. And so what we have committed in this conference report is for the Ways and Means and the Finance Committees consulting with our members in our conferences to try to bring a solution within the House rules to you for consideration. And I'm absolutely committed to doing that.
As the subcommittee chair that chairs the subcommittee on the House rules, I would welcome working with all three of you gentlemen to get this fixed. This is an unintended consequence, in my opinion, and it's something that's very important for the American economy and the American consumer. So I look forward to making sure that we can get it fixed.
Thank you, sir.
I just want to take a moment to since I'm sitting here, to go on record that I agree with Mr. Levin and the chairman. This is a mistake, and it's something I think that we can work together in correcting.
I know it won't be this easy since we all agreed so well, but I look forward to working with the three of you and any members on the Rules Committee and other members to fix this, because our American economy is suffering as a result of a misinterpretation of the House rules, in my opinion. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Brown.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question? Usually by the time it gets down to me, we've got the statement from the administration as their intentions. Do we know if the administration intends to sign this if it's passed by both houses of Congress?
I think so.
They have agreed to do so.
We don't have a statement of administration.
But that's what you've been told. Well, yeah. Well, I wanted to say to both chairmen how much I appreciate this. This is very important to me. I voted for TPA this summer with the understanding from our leadership that this legislation would be forthcoming. And I know it's gone through a tortured process to get here, but this is our leadership making good on promises made to me and to a number of other members of our body. There were two particular provisions that were very important to me. One is one dealing with steel dumping. Yes. I have 3 steel mills in my district. They employ 5,000 people. They pay great wages. I've talked to the people that run each of those 3 mills. Those jobs are directly threatened by dumping from a number of countries, not just one. So I appreciate that. I think the currency manipulation provisions are extremely important too. I'm a free trader, but free trade doesn't mean anything goes. And sometimes in our zeal for free trade, we let anything go to the detriment of American businesses and American workers. And so I appreciate the hard work you two gentlemen did on this, and you, Mr. Levin, as well, because if we can't stand up for the American worker, I don't know why we would be here. If you might want to comment to that.
In 30 seconds, let me say thank you for pointing out this is fulfilling the commitment that then Chairman Ryan, as Chairman of the Ways and Means, and our leadership made for those of you who believe, like me, free trade is accountable trade, where you play by the rules and they're enforced. And whether you are in the currency case, Representative Candace Miller and the Michigan delegation worked beautifully to put strong provisions here. In the steel area, you and others who brought these issues forward, and throughout the conference, this is that fulfillment. And by the way, that's what regular order brings. The ability for us to keep improving legislation, work across aisle, and find common ground. That's what this conference report represents.
And I thank you both, and you, Mr. Levin, for all the work you've done on this. And I'm looking forward to voting for this and seeing the president sign it. Thank you, and I yield back.
Yes, sir, thank you very much. The gentleman from the state of Washington, Mr. Newhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Sessions. Mr. Chairman, gentlemen, thank you for being here and bringing this legislation before us. Coming from the state of Washington, as Mr. Reichert may have already pointed out, trade is very important to our economy. A huge part of not only agricultural production, but manufacturing relies on those foreign markets. And so I think at least 40% of the jobs in our state are tied in some way to trade. So it's a big deal. It really is. And so strengthening our hand in trade in any way is seen as a positive thing. I've been like my colleague from Alabama, as a free trader as well. Supported the trade agreements, the TPA as well. There have been some concerns, though, about obligations of our government as it relates to agreements that may be with other countries, and so I appreciate the language in here strengthening our position in those aspects. And I just wanted to point out that this makes a good situation better. So if you have any comments on some of that as far as the United States leverage in trade negotiations, it would be helpful. But I mainly wanted to thank you for bringing this forward and fulfilling an obligation that, like the previous speaker said, that we were promised. And
yes. Well, Mr. Newhouse, again, briefly, thank you for pointing out this does strengthen our hands in our negotiations, because if our trading partners know that we're serious about holding these trade rules accountable and enforceable, frankly, it changes the negotiating leverage up front. And because we covered, thanks to your work and many of you on this dais, because of you bringing these concerns and solutions to us, that's why we have not only the strongest trade rules in Trade Promotion Authority, now we have the strongest enforcement rules that this Congress has seen, the country has seen. That's why I'm optimistic that we finish this year on a strong trade note on trade, so we can begin the hard work of 2016 as well.
Could I just answer that briefly? This doesn't, in any significant way, strengthen the enforcement provisions. There are some words that do that. In many cases, the administration could have done it on its own. The real issue with enforcement is not really the language, but it's the will. And where there's a lack of will, it doesn't matter what the language says. And it doesn't really significantly change even the language in terms of the capacity of the administration, whether Republican or Democratic, to enforce our laws. We'll have to debate that tomorrow. I think the bells have rung, and you want to kick us out of here, don't you?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity.
Mr. Hess, thank you very much. Is there any other member that seeks time? Seeing none, I want to thank all three members of the Ways and Means Committee. Please do remember that our awesome stenographer would appreciate anything that you brought in writing that would enable her to further complete her task of her important assignment today. And I want to thank you all very much, and we look forward to seeing you in the very near future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. This closes the hearing portion of H.R. 644 and H.J. Res. 75. The chairman would like to announce to the committee something that some may be aware of, but the Senate has evidently now passed their CR language, and we are expecting receipt of that. Would like to include it in whatever we report out of here with respect to not having to come back and redo or change something. So what we're going to do is after talking with Mr. Halpern, I believe Mr. Halpern has spoken with properly, what we're going to do is be subject to the call of the chair. We're going to try and before we go to votes, which is now 2:54 p.m. in the afternoon in Washington Eastern Time, hopefully sometime in the next hour or so, but before we go, we look forward to getting back together upon receipt of that document that would come from the Senate. Then we would get our work done. Anything further from any committee member? We'll be subject to the call of the chair. Rules Committee come to order, and thank you very much for joining us. The chairman now look to the chairman from Oklahoma for a motion. Chairman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant a rule providing for consideration of the conference report to accompany H.R. 644, the Trade Facilitation and Trade Enforcement Act of 2015. The rule provides that the conference report shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against the conference report and against its consideration. The rule provides that the previous question shall be considered as ordered without intervention of any motion except 1 hour of debate and one motion to recommit, if applicable. Section 2 of the rule provides for the consideration of the Senate amendments to H.R. 2250, the Legislative Branch Appropriations Act of 2016. The rule makes in order a single motion offered by the chair of the Committee on Appropriations or his designee that the House concur in the Senate amendments to H.R. 2250. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the motion and provide that it is not subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule provides that the Senate amendments on the motion shall be considered as read. Finally, the rule provides 1 hour of debate on the motion equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member on the Committee of Appropriations.
You've heard the motion from the gentleman from Oklahoma. Is there amendment or discussion? Gentleman's recognized.
A particular discussion, but I do have a question. In H.R. 2250, the ledge branch, is there a COLA for members in that measure?
I do not believe so.
Oh, okay, I just, I want to make sure.
But it only addresses the CR.
All right.
But with
So there's still hope.
With the gentleman's comments, I do recognize that the gentleman has brought this as an issue at least one time, and I believe it forthrightly should be discussed. It was discussed, as you talked about, with federal judges. It's done in a context of making sure that this body has men and women who can adequately represent all areas economic of our country, and it is increasingly becoming more difficult. Washington, D.C. is the most expensive city in the United States, and living in the most expensive parts. Thank you very much. There's your COLA. Does gentleman seek additional time?
I've received perhaps the only COLA I will receive, Mr. Chairman.
Well, courtesy of the gentleman from Ohio, and it says there, I don't know what the saying is on that, but you got your COLA. Thank you very much. Is there further amendment or discussion? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the motion from the gentleman from Oklahoma. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. And accordingly, the gentleman, Mr. Cole from Oklahoma, will be representing Republicans. And Mr. Polis for Democrats. I want to thank all the members. In particular, I'd like to thank Don Sisson, who is from the White House, who has consistently been at Rules Committee meetings, considers himself not only a detailee, I think, to each of us, but has properly made sure that we're updated. I think another. In fact, he gives me an answer. But my point is that as an example of a working relationship, I think we're trying to work on more things to accomplish them as opposed to more things that we find that get in the way. And I want to publicly state the confidence that I appreciate and have in him from the White House working with us.
Well, I just love Don.
Oh, well, then you're
He was one of the best
you're
employees
conflicted.
the world ever had.
You're conflicted.
Right, I hated to see him go.
Well, he's doing a fine job, and I want to
I'd
publicly
rather
say
somebody
that.
else would write me a letter and let me have Don.
Sometimes you get both. Thank you very much. It appears as though we've done our work for the day, and I assume next week we will come back on probably Tuesday. Is the presumption that we will be back it is a presumption that Tuesday will be a day that we will be back. The committee is now done with this work for today. Thank you very much.